favorite things about philosophy is its ability to deal with a variety of contexts and disciplines. And for me, the most interesting facet of philosophy's use in the real world is its application to politics. As a young, fledgling, anarcho-curious man, I identify as anarchist now, but how serious is it? I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But one of the questions I've been really asking myself lately is what would a non-statist government look like? What would it do? What are its responsibilities? How would it function? Because, Noam Chomsky makes the concession that you don't have to necessarily get rid of government in its entirety for you to embrace anarchist ideas. So, as I was listening to NPR today, yeah, I know, if you want to look for anarchist ideas, NPR is a terrible, terrible place to go. But I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about the recent outbreak of Ebola in Africa. And a lot of the anarchism that I've been reading lately has been divided between anarcho-communism and anarcho-capitalism. And, we can argue and debate about the differences of those philosophies probably until, for years and years and years. But this presents, for me, an interesting question. One of the things the anarcho-capitalists complain about is the presence of crapitalism, where the government's role in subsidizing industries really just destroys the concept of the free market. Once you've got a government just injecting loads and loads of money into a system, whether it be through printing money, causing inflation, or any other things like bailouts or anything like that, you really don't have a traditional free market anymore. And that, really leads to a lot of the antagonism against government and, this is kind of an incendiary word, but the worship of the free market as, the universal governing force for all things good in the world. But I present this question. One of the points that was made in this report on NPR, this was about the Ebola outbreak in Africa. One of the big problems with treating Ebola is the fact that it's this horrendous, awful, nightmare viral disease. But there really isn't that much research going into a vaccine for it. And, vaccines are, pretty effective once they've been developed. Why isn't there a lot of money being poured into Ebola in its vaccine development? Well, Ebola just doesn't get that widespread. As awful as it is, and as devastating as it is, its potency to wreak huge, gigantic amounts of havoc is kind of low because it kills so many of the people it infects. It's really hard for a pandemic to take hold when it kills the host so quickly, so horribly, and the process of being infected by Ebola is so outwardly just, horrible that you can contain those outbreaks pretty quickly, even as, easily spread as the virus is. So you have this really strange effect because the amount of people who need Ebola vaccines is small. You don't see a lot of investment in the development of that vaccine because the pharmaceutical companies don't really have much of an incentive to develop that vaccine from a financial perspective. So, does that mean the pharmaceutical industry is evil? No. They're doing what corporations and what industries do. They're trying to make money. And if there isn't a financial incentive for companies and corporations to go into these areas and treat these diseases, they're not going to do it. It doesn't mean they're bad, but it does present a really interesting problem. Because who are the entities who would traditionally provide the funding for that research? It's the government. It's the large, typically entrenched powers that are acting as kind of like those strange moral forces to fill in the gaps. And I've heard, again, I know, shut up about Molyneux, but I've heard this point come up on his call-in show when people have called in and talked about scientific projects like the Large Hadron Collider. So much of that is, taxpayer-based. Typically, the anarcho-capitalist response to this need would be something like, well, you'd have to expect charitable giving. I really am suspect that the ability of a society to do something like cure or fight Ebola in an effective manner from a charitable perspective. So, I'm very much staying to the left-wing side of this issue because I just don't see how you can reconcile those points. Again, another one of the big points that Molyneux makes is that we can't imagine what a non-state organization or a non-state approach to a society would look like. So it's not necessarily a death blow to bring up issues like this. It's simply a matter for debate and a matter for discussion. But I do think it's a very worthwhile area for exploration. How do we fix that problem? And, for an industry that's not going to address the issues that are not profitable, would anyone argue that we don't need an Ebola vaccine? That would be obscene.